wanted to thank everyone for joining us today, and a big thank you to our sponsor, StyleMark, for their continued support of our chapter throughout the year. We're very excited to be here today with author Larry English, friend of the Institute, to discuss his work, Office Optional. He wrote this book right before COVID-19 pandemic came out, and we thought what a better way to serve our members and friends so that we'll dig in and talk about all of his findings. Quick intro to RDI for anyone who's not familiar. We are the Retail Design Institute, and we are the retail profession. We are the retail industry's creative professionals. We're a nonprofit supporting that group. We've been around since the 1960s, and we love to get together and have networking events, development events to further promote our profession. If you're interested in any membership opportunities, just want to let you know to check out our website, because we currently are offering free membership. So now's a great time to join RDI. Today we'll be listening to Larry discuss his book for about 20 minutes before we open the floor to discussion and Q&A. So for a little housekeeping, please keep your questions till the end. You can jot them in the chat section of the Zoom. If you're not comfortable asking them at the end, I can facilitate those questions, or if you just want to keep it as a note, that's fine too. And then once Larry is through with his presentation, I will open up your ability to put yourselves on screen and use your audio to participate yourselves. And I think that's about it. So without further ado, I will pass it off to Larry. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's funny, I was writing the book prior to the pandemic, and I was talking to my partner about doing the book, and he's like, that is an incredibly stupid idea, Larry. And then the pandemic happened. He's like, that's an incredibly brilliant idea, Larry. So it accidentally worked out. And I'll talk about that in a second. So I'm excited to talk to you today. I have not given this presentation to a design-focused group yet. And we're doing a ton of work with customers that want to permanently adopt remote work. And they're saying, hey, you need to go talk to our real estate group, because we want to get rid of 50% of our space, and we need to know how to configure it. We need to know how much we need. And those answers are not out there. Nobody knows. Everybody's kind of making this up as we go along. And so I'll be excited to have that dialogue with you. So if we go to the next slide there, please. There we go. So here's how we structured the talk today. I'm going to talk about the book and the key concepts in the book, probably about 2/3 of the 20 minutes. And then I'm going to end on what we're seeing in the marketplace, kind of broader implications around digital transformation and its impacts on design. So as Lindsay said, I'll present for 20-25 minutes, depending on how excited I get. And then we'll go into Q&A. So please go ahead. Next slide there, I'll introduce myself. So just really quickly about myself. I worked for one of the big international consulting companies out of college, and I was working 100 hours a week. So 10 p.m. every night, even weekends, for 5 years. And I'm like, this sucks. Surely I can't live this way forever. I'm going to die. And so I had a midlife crisis at 25. My wife and I, a newlywed wife, bought a one-way ticket to Iceland, and then we just kept going and did that for a year, and realized I wanted to do something different, make a big statement. I thought there was a better way to do business, and came back and we started Centric, and that was 20 years ago. And since then, we've grown to about 1,000 people in 12 US cities and in India. And we have been remote from the beginning, and we've learned how to do it. And so the other thing that I will say is we are a consulting company. So we are on the front lines right now, helping many companies permanently adopt remote work. And then we're also helping them with what I would call becoming digital first companies or business anywhere companies. So everything from reimagining their customer experience with digital channels to getting everything to the cloud, to the software that their teams need to operate remotely. Next slide, please. There you go. It's coming up there slowly. All right, so this first section, I'm going to talk about how to permanently adopt remote work. So there's some companies that are just saying, hey, I'm trying to get through COVID, and then everybody's coming back into the office. And what's interesting is we are pulling and working with so many of these companies, and their HR departments are pulling their employees, and their employees are like, I am not coming back into the office, maybe 1 or 2 days a week, but if you make me, I'm going to go find a different job. And so we think that companies are going to be forced to have remote workers ultimately to be successful. And we'll talk about that in a second. So I'm going to talk about how to permanently adopt remote work, not temporarily. So companies that want to permanently do this. So next slide, I'm going to introduce the book. There we go. So the key takeaway from the book is any company can permanently adopt remote work. They can have a great culture, and they can learn to work collaboratively and build deep relationships. I'm going to highlight some of those concepts on the next few slides. I obviously can't cover everything, but this book is meant to be a complete how-to guide. And the proceeds from the book are going to charities to help improve the digital divide, which I'm super excited about. So as I mentioned, we launched as a virtual company 20 years ago, and we did it not to save money on real estate. It was more about people, our employees, being happy and having better balance in their lives. And so what happened is we learned how to do it, and we figured out the secret that is great. It was a great way to run a company, and everybody's a lot happier. And then, companies have kind of figured this out through the pandemic. And so why did I write this book? Is I was out talking to executives all the time, and they would just look at me with blank stares whenever I said we were remote and we had won a lot of awards for our culture, and I kept having to explain it over and over again. And so if you read the book, there's probably 50 stories of where we've screwed up along the way and lessons learned, some of them sad, some of them hilarious. And so I wanted to get that out there. I looked, there was very little written on the subject, and so decided to write this book. And then, we could start to see the signs that this was going to happen. I thought it was 10 years out. So we could see our customers it was okay to work remote, and the technology was getting better and better. And so, and then the pandemic happened, and 10 years of adoption happened in basically 3 months. And so everybody's been obviously interested in this book, and it's turned into a service offering for us. So I'm going to go through kind of those key concepts, but the idea is if you want to permanently adopt remote work as a company, there are a lot of changes that you have to make in terms of your people and your operations. And so I'll highlight those on the next few slides. Go to the next slide, please. So I'll start with one of the stories from the book is we were having a happy hour, and this person wants to remain nameless. But we were talking about the craziest places that we've taken a business call. And he mentioned that he had Friday mornings, he has a difficult time getting from his workout to a meeting. And so so he'll take the conference call at 7:30 in the morning in the shower. And so what he'll do is he'll set it up on a ledge and mute, and he'll shower and all that stuff. And then of course he gets called on, and he has to unmute and stand there freezing, answer the question, and then, finish his day. This is an extreme example, but my point is what we've learned is you have to make it okay to work from anywhere. And you encourage employees that it is completely okay. We want people to do stuff during the day to have that flexibility. So if you're going to your yoga class in the middle of the day, please, and tell me, don't hide it, make it completely okay. And so this brings to kind of the key point, which is you have to start with the foundation of trust. So many companies we work with, they'll want to put in software that monitors if the person is sitting at their desk. That is the absolute, you're going to have a terrible culture. That is the exact wrong thing to do. And we've learned it over the years. And so what I would say is we've worked with thousands of employees, and that is never, ever the issue of people not working hard. What actually happens is the opposite. People end up working way too much, and you have to train them on boundaries and how to be a virtual employee so that they don't. And then finally, the point here is when we were researching the book, there's actually an ROI to all of this. Trust leads to happier employees when they're trusted, and that leads to a better culture, and then they take better care of their customers, and it leads to higher profits as a company. So it's kind of been proven out. So we'll go to the next slide. One more there. Awesome. So I have 4 boys, and 2 of them have had COVID. The first kid, it was right when COVID was happening, and so he was in college and graduating, and we were super scared. And it, it was hard because we couldn't be with them. We could just stand like 20 feet away with masks on. And fast forward, the second kid, just all of his roommates got it in college, and they've been quarantining, and they were like tubing at our lake house, and so much less anxiety this time around. But we've had employees, parents die from it, and I'm on a hospital board, so I've seen firsthand the effects of it. So it's had just a huge impact on me over this last 6 months. I think it's taken a toll emotionally. And I'll tell you why I'm sharing that in a second. So the next key point is you have to train your workforce on long-term remote skills. And so the biggest grouping of that is how you build relationship virtually. It's a skill set, and it can be trained and it can be learned. And you have to teach everybody how to do that if you're going to be a remote company. And so the first one was what I was doing there at the beginning by modeling vulnerability. I sucked at it as a leader forever. But what happened is we've learned that vulnerability actually is the shortcut to trust. And so if you model vulnerability and show your vulnerability and you're like everybody else, people will trust you faster. And so when you're trying to build those virtual relationships, it is one of the tools or techniques that you can learn to build those tighter relationship. The next couple on there, like bringing your whole self to work, we want people to share their whole lives because you build a deeper connection with people when you understand what they're all about. You've got to take time to nurture those personal relationships, sitting at your desk, having a virtual lunch together. You have to go, those things that happen in between in the hallways, on breaks, don't happen in a virtual company. And so you have to recreate them. And then finally, we use a book called Crucial Conversations, but we have to, it's hard enough to resolve conflict when you're in person, but doing that virtually is even harder. And so we train people on conflict resolution using a book called Crucial Conversations. I'm going to cover the next one on the next slide. If you could just hop to that one really quick here. Awesome. Thank you. Hopefully everybody's still awake. It's kind of weird not being able to see the audience. All right. So somebody asked me to add this slide after one of our presentations. And there's actually a skill to being a great virtual team member. And I'm not going to go into all of these, but I will highlight a couple. And so one of those is staying focused. One of the things that I see all the time is people multitask. And you've got to learn to, whatever your task is, if you're on that conference call, you're on that conference call. You're not doing email, because you're going to be much more of an effective virtual employee. And I watch a lot of people make that mistake. Let's see, we've hit on some of these. We want people to contribute. We want them to put themselves out there, and I'll get to that in a second in the tools. If you could hop to the next slide really quick. And this talks about leadership. So I've seen this, I've done this. You can sit in your office all day long when you're working in a virtual company or leading a virtual company, and it is the exact wrong thing to do. People, employees feel disconnected really quickly in a remote environment. And so as a leader, you've got to really be reaching out and pulling them in. There's an old management saying, you can't coach from the press box. And that was meant to say, you're out in the office, walking the floors, you're on the manufacturing floor. You need to do the same equivalent in the virtual world. And so, you've got to be checking in frequently and building and it's not just business, it's building connection on a personal level with people. The other thing that I would say that you have to learn to do is please, please, please do not give feedback over email. Feedback is hard enough. And so we encourage everybody, it has to be done either over video call or, when the pandemic's over, in person, but you got to learn not to, it's tempting to do it over email, and it's really not a good idea. And then finally, I would say what we've learned is the key to scaling our remote culture is having great leaders that match our culture and know how to lead a virtual workforce. So if you go to the last slide there, I'm going to talk about recruiting because everybody's running into this right now. And another story, we had started to recruit virtually, and we're a little nervous about it. And so there was a guy who was about to start at the client, and he passed. We did video interviews, everything passed. It looked great. And I was going to meet him 30 minutes before he was going to go onto the client site. And so I walk into the Starbucks and I see him and I'm like, oh my gosh, good. He looks normal. He's dressed nice. And I sit down in front of him and I'm blown backwards because he has the worst breath that I've ever smelled in my entire life. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Does Starbucks have mouthwash? I'm so screwed. You would never think that that's not one thing that you would think of in a virtual interview that you had to worry about. The key point here that I want to talk about is you can virtually recruit. We think that we can figure out about 90% of what we need to figure out virtually, but that 10%, depending on the role, you probably have to do that remaining 10% in person. So we have people that we've hired completely virtually that work remotely. 100% recruiting process is virtual, and they've worked out great. I would say because we're a consulting organization and social skills are so important, the vast majority, that last 10% we want to see in person because they're just little social cues that you just can't see unless you're in a social setting. I'll keep going here. All right, so if you could live in any sitcom, which one would it be and why? And if you think, what has been your highest high of this month? Let's take last month since it's the beginning of the month. Your highest high of the month and your lowest low of the month on a personal level. And I'll explain why I'm asking those in a second. So you have to adjust how you operate when you're a virtual company. And so, the big one is all the work gets done in virtual meetings. And so you actually want to structure your virtual meeting structure to handle all the things that you need to do to reinforce connection and culture. And so as an example, we leave time at the beginning of all of our meetings for just personal connection. So kind of call it a virtual water cooler. And, we might open, like I just did, with a formal question like that, and then we'll go around the room. So you learn about the people and you're connecting with them on a personal level before you get into any of the business. And we've seen, because we've been helping companies do this, what they're so used to when they're in the office, you just start the meeting, right? Because all of that stuff takes place outside of the meeting room, and you need it to happen in the meeting room. And so you change the call, you change your call structure to do that. We also use it to reinforce culture. And so one story that recently happened is two of our employees became naturalized US citizens, and the whole team got them a flag that flew over the US Congress building as a gift for becoming US citizens. And that matches we have an unmatched experience as our core purpose, and that matches it. And so we'll tell those stories so that everybody understands them. And you normally wouldn't get those. So, and then I'll go to the next one. So this is really important. I think that the way that this will end up and the way that I would advise is you still want to have office space, or you certainly want to get together. And so we would advise that a hybrid approach is the best if you can do it. So not 100% remote, but some office space, and certainly even if you don't have office space, you got to get together in person. So face-to-face does not go away. And I'll just try and give you an example. So we get in the US, we get everybody together 3 times a year. It's hugely expensive. And one of those is I'll just give you an example. We went down to New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, and we all did a day of service where a community center had been underwater for 30 days and, in a disadvantaged area. And so we had 5 busloads of people. We worked on that all day. We're tired, exhausted. And we go back to the hotel, I think it was a Sheraton, and there's this commotion in front, and there's this huge line of people lining the entryway. We're like, what is going on? And it was the entire staff of the hotel had come out, and they clapped as we got off the buses and thanking us for our service to the community. And still gives me chills thinking about it. But my point here is it's hugely expensive. I can't measure the ROI, but what it does for bonding and memories and stories, and reinforcing your culture is invaluable. And what we found is you need to get together in person, because it deepens bonds and relationships. It energizes people. It reinforces those virtual relationships that they've made. It builds new networks. You want to build it. You need that sense of connection. And so the other part is just like working with teams. What we've seen is, it's groups that frequently add new members probably need to get together a little bit more often. Teams that are just starting a project together. If you hire people out of college, we found that is difficult just to let them out in the wild, and we want to have them in the office so they can learn how to work. Or if you have teams with recurring conflict, that might be an example. And so a lot of companies are learning this, but the key point here, especially as it relates to design, is, office spaces will probably be, much more collaborative with hoteling space. And that's what the clients that we're working with are asking us to do. So if you go to the next slide there, I'll just hit on this pretty quickly, but measurement when you can't see everybody is really critical. And so we've built feedback mechanisms across our company, because when they're virtual, you've got to keep your pulse on how things are going, and you're not necessarily going to get them when you're having those one-on-one conversations with with an employee. And so we use this to improve culture, see how our employees are feeling, what concerns they have. I will say some of the best ideas about how to improve our culture have come from these surveys. There's a lot of different ways that you can do it, and we've experimented with all kinds of things, but I would say 3 things that I would incorporate. One is make sure there's an anonymous feedback mechanism. There is some way to make it quantifiable. So we use the NPS Net Promoter Score, and I can actually see in the organization by those scores, I can see where there's a problem. I don't know what the problem is, but I know where I've got to go dig in. And you couldn't do that unless there was some sort of quantitative measurement. And then finally, as much as I didn't like some of the external feedback, anonymous posting sites, people are very, very honest on those. And so I've learned to embrace them. If you're true about your culture and you just put it out there, sure, you're going to get people that are going to leave some stuff that's unfair, but it does give you a good indication. So I would use all 3 of those mechanisms if you're going to be virtual. Next slide. And so I think this is the last one for this section. So the biggest mistake that I've made as leading a virtual company is I did not invest in software for way, way too long. Now the software wasn't great for a long time, but now it's gotten better. And we were highly inefficient in everything that we did. It took more time and manpower to get everything done. Our employees were frustrated. They were just fighting technology. And what I didn't realize is that if you use the right tools, not only are you going to be more efficient and collaborate better, but the tools actually help you build culture, believe it or not. And so just, a few examples of that. Didn't realize because, everything is out there as a recordable history. When you put in some of these tools, it trains new employees on your culture. They can see how you interact. One guy just started with us and he's like, oh, wow, I see how you guys treat each other. I completely get it. It breaks down silos because all the information is out there transparently. And so people are more effective, but then also it increases trust because you have transparency because everything is out there. And it's kind of cool. It builds bonds across the entire company. So we have virtual groups, like we have a veteran group that is all the veterans in the organization. And when a new veteran joins, they become part of that group and they instantly have a sense of belonging and they really appreciate it. So it helps reinforce and have a more cohesive culture. The other thing that we've seen is companies that don't invest in technology are having a really hard time attracting and retaining the younger Gen Y employees because they're so used to that stuff, that environment in their daily personal lives. If you don't have it, they hate it. And you're not going to be able to keep them. And then the final thing I would say is we actually have 4 generations working together for the first time in history, from everything from the boomers down, and they all have different ways that they like to interact. And so if you have the right tools that allow them interact in the way that they like, you're going to retain more people. Last point here is hopefully you can see from this that there's a lot to becoming a remote company, and it's a holistic approach across your technology, your process, and your people. All right, I will, that's kind of the overview of the book. And then I'll just take a few, I just have a few slides on this. I'm going to talk about kind of broader business anywhere impact on design. So next slide there, please. Thank you. So we are kind of using these terms interchangeably. We've kind of coined these, but becoming a digital first organization or becoming a business anywhere organization, you can see from this that what we found is it has, if you look at what happened in China after they got the COVID under control, customers that went to digital channels, they did not want to go back. And I think we're going to experience the same thing. It's accelerated digital channels in the US. And all these organizations were caught flat-footed. And so they're all rushing to put in, remote tools. How do I get all my data to the cloud? How do I do everything in the cloud? How do I automate my processes? If I was relying entirely on my supply chain from China and just in time, my supply chain just stopped. And so people are actually going to a just in case supply chain delivery method, but we're seeing organizations basically a broad impact across their entire organization because of this. Go to the next slide. This is just Larry's commentary and sort of predictions. Don't know if they're going to be true or not, but what I would say, and everybody that we've been working with and from our own experience, I think a hybrid model will be the preferred model for a company's workforce. And so we're seeing, certainly less office space. They're going to greatly reduce their real estate footprint, and they'll probably have geographic hubs where they place their offices strategically, and they'll be more configured for collaboration and hoteling. And obviously the spaces will need to be designed for building connection and trust because you're not in there as much. The other trend that I'll see is kind of this rise of the gig worker. You'll hear terms digital nomad or Zoom towns. In fact, my 3 sons are out of the house, and so my youngest is doing remote learning, and so my wife and I are going to go out with him to Lake Tahoe and be digital nomads for a month here starting in a couple weeks. Except for they have, believe it or not, they have cases of the bubonic plague. I didn't even think that was possible. So COVID wasn't enough for us, so we thought we'd up our game. But the idea here is I think you're seeing actually countries incentivize people to come to work there as digital nomads. I do think co-location companies will survive. I think I saw them present, one of their executives present 4 years ago, and we were just looking at all the executives and I were looking at each other. We're like, this model's, it's messed up. It's not going to work. And it was largely because of their financial model. They just bought really expensive real estate. I do think these companies will, because of the gig trend, these co-locations companies will thrive. And then we hit on this is seamless integration of digital channels into the customer experience and customer journey. Think about telehealth. I'm on board of the hospital. We could not forever get doctors to adopt telehealth. And we couldn't get hospitals to do it. And then this happened and everybody's like, oh, this is great. How do I permanently do this? And so right now, all the healthcare providers are reimagining their experience to adopt more digital into it and healthcare at home and all those kinds of things. So with that, I think I am done. And so that is it. We'll get to Q&A. Thank you. Hopefully I didn't yak for too long.
Thank you, Larry. That was awesome. Everybody, I am struggling to figure out the Zoom and how to let everyone on video, but I believe you have the ability to put yourself to speak any questions. I have given you that. So if someone wants to try and let me know. Everyone, I think you just have to hold down the space bar when you're asking. No amount of preparing will ever. I'll ask my first question while I try to still figure it out. I'm putting it down. Oh my gosh. So Larry, I love the idea of icebreakers to start meetings and not multitasking to stay alert and focused during the meetings. But I've also read a lot of research and lately about the increased amount of screen time that we're all facing that we're not used to, and how that's kind of been a detriment to people's health. So do you have a recommendation, like how do you look at numbers of meetings per day? Because I mean, sometimes in the office we're back to back to back. So do you have a point of view on that?
We do, and actually our portal and our folks that install Teams, there's actually some pretty deep research of looking at people with a 2D image versus seeing them in person and the fatigue that comes with that. So a couple of things that I would say is we make video optional on almost all of our calls. And the reason for that is because somebody might not have showered, or they're taking their kids somewhere. We want them to have the flexibility to have, to do their daily life and go do whatever they want. So yesterday I was on a call at my son's golf match talking in a golf voice. And of course I was not on video, but I was giving people updates. So the other thing that we've seen is organizations will, they'll overschedule everybody. And so they'll do 8 hours of calls, and that is, you can't do that. You're going to get burned out. And so, part of this as creating the right environment is on the leader of that group, the leadership of the organization. So don't text or chat somebody at 12 o'clock at night and expect that they will reply right away. You need to respect that people need quiet hours, and that it's okay that they're not responding until the next morning, because you do not want people to get fatigued. The other thing along the lines of what you're asking is people are time slicing now more, and they're doing the flexibility, but they feel like they're never off. And very normal, we see that all the time. So it's up to you as a person. And like I said, as long as your leadership's making it okay, you need to learn to shut off. And I'm guilty of this. But a lot of times I'll just, I'll close my door, turn my phone off in there, and I will not go look at it so that I get that mental break.
Awesome. Thank you. I applaud Gary. Thank you so much for jumping on and using our chat feature. Anyone else who wants to ask a question, this might be the best way to do it. So I'm going to ask a question from Gary. How can we handle our team when it's an international team? For example, I work with factories and designers from different countries and different cultures.
I'm not sure. I think it's Gary, if he could expand a little bit. So it's interesting. So as an example, one company we're working with, what they found is outside of the US, like if you're in Japan or Korea, they live in such small spaces that it's really hard for them to remote work. And so they actually have to have more office space for people to come into. I'm not sure exactly if what you were talking about on the culture side of things, because we work overseas in Europe, and then obviously we work with our Centric India team, and we've learned to have the same culture in both places, but I didn't know if that was what he was asking.
Let's see if he answers. Gary, did that answer your question? Are you able to answer it? I'm still looking on the settings. Sorry, everyone.
I can keep talking until I answer it. So as an example, what we figured out was early on when we were growing our company, our culture was so important to us that we actually developed a day-long training, a day and a half long training on our culture. And so we're teaching people our core values, and we do that exact same training in India. So people are learning what our core values are and how to demonstrate them in that country, so that we match kind of the same culture.
Everyone, I do believe you're able to press and hold the space key to temporarily unmute yourselves. Oh. But Gary did say that was answered. He moved that up.
Okay, great.
Well,
I see the next one from Steve Ross. He's asking about team building activities that would get away from. So I have during COVID and after COVID. So what I would say is after COVID, and what we do is anytime we get together, whether it's leadership team or anybody, it's not about business. It is, there's a huge, we try to design it so that there are chances for bonding. And that usually means some sort of activity, team activity, personal activity. We've done all kinds of crazy things. But you know, you want to build that in, so you're building personal connections when you get together. And then you know, during COVID, I think everybody's kind of trying to figure this out and how you do the team building. You know, example, we've done all kinds of crazy things. Like when we were doing our training, we did like an online scavenger hunt. We've done one exercise is each person drew their life on one sheet of paper digitally, and then they explained it to everybody, which really created a great personal connection. We're doing one right next week where you're given a gift certificate or charge code to buy your favorite lunch for somebody else. And then you guys actually meet virtually and you share, and they'll do the same thing for you. And then you share that meal together. So you've got to get creative in the virtual world because it is definitely harder. Let's see, it seems that those working remotely are sometimes undervalued, seen as consultants rather as part of the team. Yeah, so thank you, Catherine. So the question was around, you know, when you're working remotely, sometimes you can be undervalued and not seen as part of the team. And absolutely true. It's interesting because HR is just really starting to figure this out. People are asking questions like, hey, if I choose to be a remote worker, am I going to get passed up for promotion for somebody that's in the office showing their face all the time? And so it's going to be a new field of study. And I think we're going to learn a lot how to do that, but you have to make it so that everybody's treated equally and fairly. And we've even seen this with conference calls where, let's say, 3/4 is in the office and the rest are virtual. And there's techniques and technology that is getting better so that because I know all of us have been on that call where there's a remote caller and you completely forget they're there and you ignore them and they can't hear. We're going to have to fix this because it is going to be the new way of doing business. So I don't have the complete answers on that other than everybody gets it and we're trying to figure it out. We're doing wine tastings, but that's mostly just for those of us that love to drink. I've done that as well. In fact, I'm doing, I think it's tonight, I'm part of this YPO group and Martha Stewart is cooking for us. We're going to cook along with her. And the food's being delivered to our house this afternoon. So I'll let you know how that goes. Let's see, how can you help manage to embrace technology they might not be comfortable with or understand how to use to engage with their team that reports to them? So this is a question around technology. So we've been doing a lot of Teams implementations. We're a Microsoft partner. And what I would say is the technology is 1/3 the implementation and the success is really 2/3 people and training. So you can put in the technology, but you've got to train everybody on how to use it and use it in the right way. And what we found is you can really use Teams really badly in the wrong way. Once we've trained people on how to use it and do it the right way, it's it is a dramatic increase in productivity that we've been blown away with. So when we turned it on, we reduced our email 25% within the first week, which was incredible. Lots of training, and then we have a change management organization, and their whole thing is about training people to use the software.
We have another question. I know you mentioned Microsoft Teams. Diana is asking, what software is Centric using for collaboration?
So we are using Teams so Office 365, and then Teams largely for all of our video calling and all that kind of stuff right now.
Awesome.
There's multiple out there. I think it's just important that you are using a good one.
We had another question from Catherine. How do you bridge a cultural divide between employees who are in an office every day and those who are working remotely from the same institution?
Similar to what we were talking about before is you have to recognize it, and you have to design how you're going to operate so that you're inclusive of both. And so that might mean, I'll give you an example. You might have some people that are extroverts that they just prefer to go into the office, let's say 3 days a week. And then you have some people that maybe they live far away, they hate the commute, and you're going to come in once every 2 weeks. So how do you design that so that it's equal and you build team time? And so an example might be, hey, every third week, we're all going to be in the office these 4 days. This is how we're going to do video calling so that everybody can be equally heard and understand. And all of your policies and how you interact have to make sure that it's fair for both. Hopefully that gives you that's a quick answer. Is there another, let's see.
I think we hit them all.
So my contact information is I think it's on the deck, and you can send that out, and feel free to reach out to me anytime. Happy to answer any questions.
Yep. Sorry for the technical difficulties, everyone. And it doesn't matter how much practice you do, there's always something that's going to come up. So I really appreciate everyone. If you don't see any more questions coming in, we'll give you 15 minutes back of your lunch hour. But I want to thank Larry so much for your time, and everyone for participating today. I found it very insightful, and we valued every minute of it. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Bye, everybody.